Welcome, everyone. How wonderful to be together today in one mountain, many paths, where our mission is what Barbara Marx Hubbard and Dr. Mark Goffney call the planetary awakening in love through unique self symphonies. We are activating a new humanity, and we are awakening as a new species, Homo Amor, the fulfillment of Homo sapiens. As a church, synagogue, mosque, temple, zendo, no one is excluded, everyone is included. And we come together to attune to the evolutionary impulse awakening within us. I am Christina Tehel, the co-executive producer, along with Krista Josepha, Jamie Long, and Jacqueline Clark, and we are delighted to gather together for our 274th live community broadcast. What a privilege it is to be part of a global community where we support humanity's flourishing. Teachings from One Mountain, Many Paths are also in books by Dr. Mark Goffney and Barbara Marx Hubbard. On our website resources page, you will find books like A Return to Eros, The Radical Experience of Being Fully Alive, by Dr. Mark Goffney and by Dr. Christina Kincaid, which is also now read on Audible by Gabrielle Anwar. Also, our live One Mountain broadcast is a key place where new teachings, new leading edge Dharma, new dimensions of the new story do emerge for the very first time. Join Jamie Long, David Cicerci, and myself for our 11th hour study course about the most pressing issues of our time in our responsibility towards the future. We've come to the edge of the human story. We've come to the place where that story can self-terminate, the 11th hour, the final chapter of the story. We don't want the story to end. This course begins next Saturday, January 15th, and you can join us by reaching out to Jamie Long, whose email is in the chat box now. Care to receive mystical gifts by stepping into the work and practice of creating the great Homo Amor library, Memory of the Future? Reach out to me for this holy opportunity, and my email is also in the chat box now. This week, I send love and gratitude and honor to Ujis, who worked hours and hours this week cutting clips for our Don't Look Up sessions. We send prayers also to Ujis' son, who had surgery this last week. And we thank Ujis and his fantastic team of Jacqueline Clark, Jamie Long, Krista Josepha, and David Cicerci, whose unique self-symphony made today's One Mountain, Many Paths possible. Use the Zoom and Facebook chat function to say hello, to let us know where you're from, to express your prayers, and to resonate the Dharma. On Zoom, check that your chat settings say everyone so that we can all hear from you. And do know that today, because we're playing clips from the movie Don't Look Up, that we will stop our streaming on both Facebook and YouTube. And the link to our Zoom is in the comments and in the description. So please join us on Zoom as soon as you possibly can. Sign up for and read our weekly emails. There you will find our replays, our community activities, our feature videos, our volunteer opportunities, celebrations, surprise, and inspiration. What to expect today? First, a recap from myself. Then Dr. Goffney sets our intention. David will resonate our evolutionary love code, then our evolutionary sermon with Dr. Goffney, and sometimes the clip from Barbara Marx Hubbard. And then we will move into meditation to enter prayer. To close, Krista will invite us deeper into community, and then we will bring everyone on at the end for an intimate dance party and our goodbyes. Mark writes evolutionary love codes. Mark and Barbara studied the codes together, comparing them with Barbara's own 52 codes for conscious self-evolution. These codes crystallize the new story of humanity, quote, evolving the course of consciousness and culture, which is the source code of love, unquote. We have the privilege to be part of the emergence of these first principles and first values. The Dharma gates are open. Every week we are blessed to serve each other in the evolution of love. Our commitment is to the quality of what we are communicating, and for each of us to take part in this creative process of articulating a new story for humanity. So because of this, we consciously decide we won't forcefully try to end at exactly a certain time, but promise fullness and explosion, to let magic evolve, to serve the evolutionary process. And we will do our best to end around 11 a.m. Pacific time. Of course, if you need to leave early, please watch the replay, and we look forward to being with you again next week. I welcome all who are new. We need you. Know that each week is a standalone, and every week builds on the week before. One Mountain, Many Paths is radically committed to telling the new universe story. Now for my recap from last week's episode 273. Don't look up. A deep look at first principles and first values and why we can't look up without them. The recently released movie Don't Look Up is about two astronomers who realize a deadly comet is on an extinction-making collision course with the Earth. But these scientists can't get anyone to look up, to pay attention. Don't Look Up, though, is not only about a comet about to hit planet Earth. It is about existential risk, an enormously important topic. We want to respond to existential risk, the second shock of existence, the death of humanity. We face many existential threats like nuclear weapons, climate change, and the death of our humanity. We respond by going inside to find out what we actually know, to create the resources, the passion, and the singularity of purpose to be a lover. We invite reality to look up against all the forces that are saying, don't look up. We will, we can, and we must love reality open and respond to existential risk directly, unequivocally, and fearlessly by pouring every resource we have to do the one thing that historians agree changes the vector of history, a new superstructure, which is a new story that integrates the best information from all the interior and exterior wisdom streams, woven together into a new whole, greater than the sum of its parts. The world story, the world view, the metaphysics, what we believe about the nature of reality, the story we live in that drives every single person, everybody is driven by a hidden superstructure, hidden stories, source code stories, the stories that we live inside of, but we're barely even aware that we live inside of them. We can deflect this comet by looking up. If this movie is about anything, it is a snapshot of the global intimacy disorder. We need each other. We can respond to existential risk. We have capacity. That is the vision of evolutionary intimacy. We're omni-considerate for the sake of the whole. Life is an ultimate value. Every life has infinite dignity and infinite value, and we give everything to create life. Value itself transcends death. By articulating the depth of value, we can claim fact as value, and science can be taken seriously. Modernity tried to say, let's get rid of interior science. We'll just have exterior science facts. But modernity forgot that a fact is a value. Only if there is interior science, value, can exterior science be taken seriously. We have capacity to tell a new story of Homo Amor, the fulfillment of Homo sapiens as a context for our diversity in which we can all play our unique instruments toward a planetary awakening in love through unique self-symphonies. That is the true meaning of being alive. And whether we live or die depends on us looking up. Now I invite us to more deeply enter the holy and the sacred space of one mountain, many paths. And I turn my word to you, Dr. Mark Offney.
Christina Amelon, thank you so much for a fantastic Dharma recapitulation from last week. And just want to thank everyone who spent, so much time this week preparing and making clips and just doing an incredible amount of work. Jacqueline and Eugis and Jamie, led by Krista, just kind of blew it away this week. And super, super thank you. And we're all in your debt. Colleen, right? I hope you're with us this week. I'll find you in the chat box. I just wrote you back, right? Thank you, right? Michael, who wrote after last week about, how we find resources and where we generate them from. This is a critical moment. Thank you for writing, Michael, and we're going to meet soon. Friends, where are we in this moment? We're poised between utopia and dystopia. And that sentence is unbelievably important. We're not on the brink of dystopia. We're poised between utopia and dystopia. There's an unimaginably beautiful future that awaits us. We can create the most good, true, and beautiful world that we know is possible. And we have the resources to do it if only, and there's a huge if only there, and we're going to talk about that if only today. And at the same time, without the if only, we actually are poised at the brink of dystopia. And not per se, as the Don't Look Up movie has been interpreted, because of climate change. Climate change is an unbelievably important issue, self-evidently and obviously. It's a far more complex issue than the way it's presented. I'd recommend two colleagues of mine, Michael Zimmerman, a professor in Denver, and Sean Hargens, wrote an excellent book called Integral Ecology, where you'll get a deep sense of what actually the ecology issue is and what climate change is. But suffice it to say that it's not the most serious of the existential risks. And when we say we're poised between utopia and dystopia, what we mean is that all civilizations, as Joseph Tainter points out, all civilizations have fallen. But for the first time, we have a global civilization. And We haven't solved any of the problems that caused the other civilizations to fall. And the way a civilization will fall today, because of exponential technologies, will be not just a temporary devastation, but a extinction or near extinction level event. That's never been true in world history. We've never had bows and arrows, and B-52 bombers don't have that capacity. And even a nuclear bomb in 1945 was in some sense controllable, right? Because it's very hard to develop enriched uranium. It takes nation capacities, national capacities. But now we have 7 or 8 other forms of existential risk that don't require state capacities, that are potential, what Nick Bostrom, who coined the term existential risk, calls black balls. Now, underneath all these existential risks, there's a overriding, underlying root cause. And the root cause, and it's dual, and this is going to take us into the movie. David's going to read the code, and then we're going to do this in-depth analysis of this movie, week 2. But let me just set the stage again, okay? Let's set the stage. Underlying all of the existential risks, whether it's from AI, artificial intelligence, and particular forms, right, of artificial intelligence, whether it's from the huge gap between the haves and the have-nots, right? Whether it's from the extraction model, which causes the exponential growth curve, which ultimately has to fall off, right? Whether it's from rogue drones generating weaponized payloads, whether it's from biological warfare through pandemics, right, of an entirely different order than what we're dealing with today, right? Whatever the particular form is of existential risk, which is actual risk to the planet, the death of humanity, and the second form of existential risk, which is not the death of humanity, but the death of our humanity, right? That we actually generate a technocracy, right? A worldwide grid where everyone is reduced to a number on the grid, operating according to an algorithmic pattern with no courses of appeal. Humans are ultimately commodified, reduced to their lowest common denominator. We get downgraded humans and upgraded algorithms. And that technocracy is where we're going. And social media is one of the forms of generating that technocracy, right? And the models, the business models of the big 5, right, in tech, which are based on their own form of extraction model, right? Extracting what they call data exhaust or data mining, right? Putting all of that data exhaust about you, meaning how long you hover, right, above, right, before you click with the mouse. What's your precise pattern of response to a series or a particular series of sequences that try and get you to respond to a particular ad? We chart the pattern of your response to particular sequences to know precisely how to manipulate you. What's the course of your month? When are you most vulnerable, right? Based on your data, right? When are you getting your period, right? And you're going to be vulnerable then. We can check, right? When might you gotten fired for a job? When, right? And it's literally the amount of data put together on you is shocking. Completely, utterly shocking. But then it's fed, it's not analyzed by an individual, it's fed into machine intelligence. Machine intelligence then produces a personality profile either on you specifically or on you as part of a what's called a peer group, but it's not really a peer group. It's people who respond to the same sequencing in their, what Daniel Kahneman calls fast thinking. So in other words, the web becomes a worldwide nervous system. It was actually called the nervous system of the planet by Alex Pentland at the MIT Media Lab, right? Who's part of this move towards this global technocracy in which free will doesn't exist for Alex Pentland, as he's declared very clearly in the MIT Technological Review. And he's based ultimately on deep roots in behaviorist psychology and B.F. Skinner. So that's the death of our humanity. So the existential risk, extinction level events, the death of humanity. Existential risk, the death of our humanity, right? Poised between utopia and dystopia. And the difference between the two, right, is in the if only. And so what are we missing? And that's that we're going to talk about the movie today. So we're missing is two things. And this is the key. The core generator function of existential risk is not an infrastructure issue. It's not the technology, right? It's not social structure. It's not actually the structure of our governments, as important as they are. But the core issue is superstructure. And superstructure means the story, the invisible framework, the inescapable framework, the story, the narrative in which we live. What's the story of value that informs everything, right? So if our story of value is what we've called Success 2.0, which is the modern success story, that's the story of modernity, after it's rejected all the value stories of pre-modernity for lots of good reasons, right? Because in pre-modernity, God and devil got really mixed up, right, Brad? Right? So along comes modernity and says there's an individual achiever, there's a separate self, right, who competes. It's rivalrous conflict governed by win-lose metrics. So rivalrous conflict governed by win-lose metrics, that becomes the DNA code, quite literally, right, of the social structure. And that DNA code, rivalrous conflict governed by win-lose metrics, gets replayed billions and billions of times. It's literally in our mind, right? And it's hard to fight an enemy who has playgrounds in your mind, right? The rivalrous conflict governed by win-lose metrics, success story governs everything we do. And it's between us and everyone, right? Are we successful is the question we're always asking. Not are we good, not are we true, not are we beautiful. Am I succeeding? Am I successful? Every company, all the divisions within a company, every religion, all the divisions within a religion, right? Every state, every province, every family, right? Every team, right? All the people within, there's always rivalrous conflict governed by win-lose metrics of separate self against separate self. That generates what we've called many times hyper-object complicated systems, right? Meaning such a complicated system of economics, of sexuality, right? Of politics, so many pieces happening all around the globe. You can't trace the financial or social instruments. Everything's dissociated from everything else, complete alienation. And the system begins to break down. Supply chains break down, currency chains break down. And they're right at the brink of breakdown. Unless you track it, you can't see it. The parts are dissociated from each other. So both of these dimensions, this complicated systems, hyperobjects, and these win-lose metrics, rivalrous conflict governed by win-lose metrics, are rooted in a deeper global intimacy disorder. The global intimacy disorder is the source for existential risk, and itself it's rooted in the lack of a shared story of value. First principles and first values embedded in a story of value, right, which can actually generate a completely different world. The only thing that's ever changed the vector of history, and on this, I agree with my colleague Yuval Harari, it's the very few things we agree on, is that only a new story of value, historically that's validated, changes the vector of history. Da Vinci, Renaissance, tells a new story. Pre-modernity and its structures are breaking down. But the threat then was relatively little, even with the Black Death, even with half of Europe virtually destroyed. There was no exponential technology. There was no global civilization with exponential technology. We're in an entirely different moment, meaning the past has passed its baton to the present. All the past needs us to fulfill its destiny. All of the sacrifices, all of the lives, all of the loves, all of the evolution of consciousness is now, the baton's passed to us. We're the present. And the future needs us. There is literally no future without us. The future doesn't exist without us. There is no future. Everything will be stillborn. Unborn trillions of people depend on us. So all of the past, all of the present, all of the future is literally in our hands, and we look down. So here we go. Let's take a look at this movie, but we're going to look at the movie not as it's been explained by the half of the people that like it, right, as a great call and cry for climate change. Climate change is a more complex issue. Look at the book I talked to you about, an important issue, but it's not the core, right? One. Two, right, we want to look at the movie as a text of culture and see What did it get right? What did it get wrong? We talked about it in broad terms last week in terms of existential risk. And I've dedicated the last, 10, 15 years to this, right? Day and night. Many of you who are with us. This is everything depends on us. And we're at the leading edge, and one mountain, many paths, right? It's the hub of literally of revolution, right? How do we actually enact a revolution in value, right? Which actually changes, evolves the source code of culture and consciousness by enacting the overwhelming moral, social joy imperative of this moment to tell a new story. Not a conjecture, not a made-up story, but to actually integrate the leading edge strands of wisdom, pre-modern, modern, and postmodern, a validated insight, and to put them together in a synergistic whole greater than the sum of the parts, which actually tells a new story that we can tell each other and we can tell at any truck driver stop, at any finance firm, in any nursery, or at any place in the world. It's a shared story of value rooted in first principles and first values. Because without first principles and first values, we don't move. Okay, now we're going to talk about today about first principles and first values and what the challenge is and why they've been rejected. And we're going to do it through the prism of the movie. So here's what we're going to do. I want to ask everyone, if you can, right, to take a look at last week. Okay, so when you finish today, we're going to send everyone, I hope by the end of the day, last week's clip, because that was the great meta context. I don't want to review any of those issues this week, but it's super important. Actually, just gentle invitation, invest yourself. Right? Forget about all the little things we're going to do today. Invest yourself. Watch last week. You need last week to get the context. It's critical. We're going to take that as a given. We're going to dive in and we're going to look at 4 sets of clips today, which are complete surprising, which have been completely ignored by culture. Either the pro-movie, anti-movie people, all ignored. None of them commented on, but they're actually the key to the whole story. So David, here we go. Resonate us the code for this week. And then we're going to dive in. David, take us inside, man.
Welcome, everyone. Welcome. And if you're new, this is the time when we resonate the code, which is the concise, consolidated topic that Mark is discussing today. And so it's really deep and really packed in there. So I've pasted it in the chat box if you're on Zoom, and it'll be in the comments section if you're on Facebook. So as I resonate it, follow along and see what piques your interest, what confuses you, or what maybe you struggle with, or maybe what triggers you. Take note of that as Mark dives in today. So here's this week's evolutionary love code. Existential risk is the second shock of existence. The first shock of existence is the death of the human being. The second shock of existence is the death of humanity. You cannot respond to the first shock without the second shock, or to the second shock without the first shock. You cannot respond to either the first or the second shock of existence without going inside and finding out what we actually know. Only first principles and first values embedded within a story of value have the capacity to respond to the first or the second shock of existence. For looking up itself is a first principle and first value. Humanity will not look up until we have moved beyond medievalism, including its modern New Age expression, and beyond postmodernism, and articulate first values and first principles embedded in a story of value. In the end, it's about looking up, loving madly, loving yourself, loving your life, loving me, loving my life, and loving our lives, and be willing to die for that love. That is the only true meaning of being alive. And then that you realize that you and we cannot and will never die, for life and love is eternal. And yet, whether we live or die depends on us. So friends, as I transition to Mark, just keep in mind that if you're on Facebook or YouTube, we're actually going to be switching to a different platform, to Zoom. So look at the link in the chat box or in the comment section and join us on Zoom if you're there. So Mark, I'll turn it back to you.
David, thank you. Oh my God. Are we ready to go, everyone? David, thank you. That's an incredibly important clip. And let's put it there in the chat box and let's dive in. Okay. So, and welcome to all the new people. We welcome, just madly good to be with you, right? And every week people join from around the world. This is, I think, our 275th week, right? We're here every week. We're broadcasting and we're studying and we're participating together in actually evolving the source code. In the old world, it happened at the university. I went and I sat in Oxford and wrote my doctorate there. It's not happening in Oxford, right? My partner, Zach, right, who's the co-president of our think tank, did it in Harvard, right? It's not happening in Harvard. There's a reason we didn't stay in Oxford and Harvard. Right? The university's not doing it. The university itself, right, is lost in its own win-lose metrics. Or Harvard is lost in its capital campaigns and in running its finances. Right? I went to Oxford. I couldn't find any real conversation. Right? The churches and the synagogues involved in their win-lose metrics, and blessings to them. They're all doing things that are of value. But actually, the real conversation, right? The place where we're actually waking up and we're saying, okay, let's change the source code of consciousness and culture, right? Is actually no longer in the old legacy institutions of power, which is why we came together to form the Center for Integral Wisdom, and why Barbara Marx Hubbard created, right, the Foundation for Conscious Evolution, which we partnered in, which is all part of our Office for the Future. Because, right, we have to actually enact today a memory of the future. We have to recover a memory of the future. Hope is a memory of the future. So with that in mind, let's go into this text of culture and let's find our way. We're going to end today, right, with prayer. Now, prayer is also a theme in the movie. It appears 5 times in Don't Look Up. We're going to talk about that next week. But when we talk about prayer and God, we're not talking about the God you don't believe in. The God you don't believe in doesn't exist. We're talking about not the prayer, which is a cosmic vending machine that you give, put in a quarter and get, right, some reward from the God you don't believe in. No, that's not what we're talking about. We're not talking about a new age medievalism replayed. We're talking about divinity as the incessant, ceaseless creativity of cosmos that knows your name, that operates and lives through first person, lives in you, as you, and through you. Third person, the 4 forces animated by Eros. And second person, the infinity of intimacy, the space between us, right? The reality of personhood, the personhood of cosmos. And God as the infinite personhood, not the person, not the grandfather or grandmother, but the infinite personhood that knows our name, in which our personhood directly participates. So we're going to get at the end to prayer, and we're going to be with Leonard Cohen, the broken and the holy hallelujah. And that's how we'll end. So let's dive in. I want to look at a bunch of sets of clips. Okay. And what we're going to do is each set of clips, we're going to look at a set of a few clips strung together. And then we're going to use those clips to actually launch board into culture and to understand where we are and where we need to go. Now, to be clear, when we do this textual reading of culture, which is going to be wildly exciting, we're not claiming that the makers of the movie had this or didn't have it in mind. It's often the case that the makers of a movie, right, are unconscious. They've got kind of a general sense, oh, wow, Adam McKay, I'm doing this movie about climate change, and that's great. But once something's been created, it's created from something deeper than the conscious mind of the creator. It emerges right from the field of culture itself. I remember sitting in Chicago with my friend then, Lana Wachowski, who actually just made a new movie, The Matrix Resurrection. But at that time, V for Vendetta was a movie that he had come out, and we sat, almost all night, right, at his place in Chicago. And I was explaining to Lana, who had made the movie, what his movie was about. Now, how can you do that? Right? Because we both understood that whatever Lana thought he was doing, the question is, what does the text say? And the text is always powerful. Texts of culture are powerful, and they're critical and crucial. So let's read texts of culture. We're going to start with Kate. Okay. So in the movie, I'm going to try and kind of lay out the frame a little bit. Okay. For those of you who are not tracking super closely, right? The general theme: comet about to hit Earth. Kate and Randall Mindy is his name. Kate Dibiasky, I believe, a student and a professor. They detect the comet. They understand. They do the calculations of the trajectory it's going to hit Earth. We all know that's happening, right? They then go to try and alert reality. They team up with Teddy, right, who's this wonderful man, right? Oligrove, right? I think I just pronounced his name wrong. I apologize for that. What is Teddy's last name? And whatever it is, Oglethorpe, right? They team up with Teddy Oglethorpe, right? They get stymied and stopped, right? They're ignored, right? They can't get their message across, right? They get commodified, they get co-opted, right? The whole movie, we talked about that all last week, right? But we're now going to look at this week, we're going to look at individual clips and see kind of what actually happens. So we're going to look at a surprising set of clips. When Kate and Randall, Professor Randall Mindy, now we're going to slow down, Professor Randall Mindy with his graduate student, Kate, doctoral student, they come to the White House. They're going to inform the president, played by Meryl Streep. Her name is Janie Orlean. Her son, Jason Orlean, is her chief of staff. They're about to meet the president to inform the president of this comment. We're at the very beginning of the movie. They're waiting because there's some crisis going on in the White House, and a general, his name is Stuart Thames, he's a 3-star general, gets them some snacks. And something strange happens with these snacks that are not commented on in culture at all, but they're actually utterly essential to the movie. And actually, there's a theme that moves through the movie several times after the snack story that we're about to see. Kate comments on this snack story, right? After Kate's unable to get anyone to respond, right? She abandons ship, right? And she goes through a very particular and gorgeous set of unfoldings. She keeps telling the snack story again and again. So take us inside. Let's see 3 or 4 clips that we're going to string together about this unspoken, hidden theme in the movie, which is actually one of the keys to the entire story. Conscious or unconscious in the mind of the movie makers doesn't matter. Let's go inside. Let's read this text of culture. Let's love this open. Let's begin to find our way to responding to existential risk. Here we go. Take us inside. We're ready, Taheli? Let's do this.
They charge an arm and a leg for this stuff. $10 a piece ought to do it.
Where do I pay for these?
It's free.
Really?
Yes, it's the White House.
The general. He charged us for the snacks, but they're free.
Oh, gosh.
Why on earth would he do that?
Why would he charge us for free snacks?
Maybe he just gets off on the power, you know, like any kind of power. It's like he knew eventually that I was going to find out that the snacks were free.
Right.
Watch out for him. He'll charge you for free shit.
Did everyone get that? 4 scenes. Okay, who tracked that? 4 scenes. None of them are noticed in culture at all. Free snacks. And it's not a casual scene in the beginning. It's repeated 4 times throughout the movie. What's it about? Who cares? Right? What? Snacks are free? Why is a 3-star general charging, right, for snacks when the snacks are free? Number one. And look at the beginning. It's the beginning scene. It's the inception of the movie. And he makes them get changed, $20. So I'll give you the $20. I'll pay for you. And then 3 times she keeps returning to the scene and she can't figure it out. Right. And when she's with Yule, that was scene 3, Y-U-L-E, Yule. He was also the dude who played in Dune, right, as Paul Atreides, if you remember him. So she's with Yule and they're both looking up and they're talking about what's going on here. So what's this about? And let's stay really close, friends. Reality is made of billions of micro actions. And if you look at the designers of the web, like Alex Pentland, who we mentioned earlier from the MIT Media Lab, who talks about, in wake of B.F. Skinner, the behaviorist psychologist, he talks about the billions of micro acts that people do every day, that they do in reaction, that are a function of what we call fast thinking. Daniel Kahneman, Nobel Prize laureate, he calls it fast thinking. It's automatic, it's unconscious, it's habitual, as opposed to kind of deep reflective thinking, which we do very little. So what Pentland understands is is that you actually create the fabric of reality through billions and billions of micro acts that happen virtually automatically, which Pentland believes correctly through nudges, through social pressure, right? Through everything that's happening today in the complex of the web, you can actually control the way people are going to vote. You can control what they're going to buy. You can actually control mood, right? In multiple ways. And that's the subject of a different conversation, which we've had several times. Now, stay close. Shoshana Zuboff wrote a book on this called Surveillance Capitalism. There's another book written a couple of years earlier by Brett Fleischman from Cambridge University called Re-Engineering Humanity. Jaron Lanier's written 3 or 4 books on this, from You Are Not a Gadget in 2007 to 10 Reasons Why to Get Off of Social Media in 2018. Right? There's an entire literature on this, which is quite good. Now stay close and stay really, really close. And we're going to get back to Zuboff and surveillance capitalism in a second. Let's just take one piece from this now, which is that there are billions of micro acts that make up the social fabric. Now, what determines our micro acts? All of our unconscious, habitual, and automatic actions, which form the fabric of society, what informs them? What informs them is always the story we're living in. We're embedded in a hidden story. We're actors in that story. Charles Taylor, a fantastic book called Sources of Self. The human being lives in inescapable frameworks. And that framework is my story, right? In advanced terms, we use mathematics, but in our everyday lives, we use stories. We're informed by story. We're entranced by story. We live as characters in a story, right? That's unbelievably important. Now, when my story is not rooted in first principles and first values, all that's left is power. That was the essence of Michel Foucault's critique, his postmodern critique of reality. All that's left is power. So what Foucault says is there's no value, which he got wrong. What he got right is when there's no value, all that's left is power. So what happens? It's an incredible scene. There's a 3-star general. Person becomes a 3-star general, it's because they're interested in power. They also may be interested in serving their country, which is beautiful, but they're also interested in power. And there's a set of micro acts. You're now giving snacks to these couple of visitors who've come to the White House. And you act, this micro act, you automatically make a power move. You don't make a value move. The value move is someone comes into your home, someone comes into your space, you feed them, you nourish them. The notion of nourishing the guest is a first value and first principle. I nourish the guest who's in my space, right? We take care of each other. We create resource for each other. We feed each other. I spent a lot of time in the Middle East, and a good friend of mine, Khalid, a Bedouin, when I would walk into Khalid's tent, the second I would walk into his tent, I was a king, and feeding me and nourishing me. And had I offered Khalid to pay for anything that he gave me, he would have shot me. I mean, figuratively, right? Because it was a violation of this first principle and first value that lived between us, that we nourish each other. So now, is everyone tracking? You come to the Pentagon. It's amazing, right? You come to the Pentagon, right? You come to the White House. The Pentagon, with its 3-star general, is in the White House, right? General Stuart Themes. And there's no first principle and first value of nourishment. There's no first principle and first value of honesty. There is no sense of radical honesty. Right? And once there's no radical honesty, once there's no first principle and first value, then it's an entire story repeated billions of times, micro repetitions, right? Micro billions of repetitions of the violation of first principles and first values. And the only thing that's left in the space, that's in the 3rd clip, is power. This is a power. It was a power movement, and it was a sadistic power movement. I want you to catch this. It was a sadistic power movement because, as Jennifer Lawrence says, Kate in the movie, he knew we were going to find out. He knew we were going to find out right after he left that it was free, and he knew we couldn't do anything about it. So once you remove first principles and first values, then you create a structure of society where the billions of micro acts that take place sans first values and first principles. So you introduce a kind of insidious undermining. The basic first principle, first value of the guest in my home doesn't exist. There's a violation of trust. There's a violation, right, and there's no love without trust. Eros always built on trust. There's no trust. And she keeps repeating the scene because she's stunned. How could that be? And she's coming to this realization that, oh my God, I thought we could make it without explicating first values and first principles. I thought we could make it just on a kind of general, feel-good, poetic, artistic, aesthetic. And I love art and I like poetry and I love aesthetics. But actually, what we're trying to do is, even after postmodernity has deconstructed all value, we think we're going to be okay. We think it's okay to actually have a success story, rivalrous conflict governed by win-lose metrics, and we'll find our way through. We won't, because the entire social fabric, now governed by what Alex Pentland calls the nervous system of the planet, becomes non-intimate. Right? The intimate universe is undermined, right, when the eros is completely destroyed, because trust is destroyed, because the nurturing is destroyed, because the guest, right, isn't honored, because the basic honesty between human beings and the basic sense of care, right, is exploded. And it comes up 4 times in the movie, again and again and again. And the best that the movie can get to, and it does its best, the best the movie can get to is right, she says power. It must have been a power trip, which is Foucault. That's the postmodern explanation. But what the movie doesn't get to is the breakdown of first values and first principles. Does everyone get that? The movie itself refuses to declare first values and first principles. And that's very much, now stay close, friends, it's very much like Shoshana Zuboff's work in Surveillance Capitalism, which is a book which analyzes the business model of the techplex. And we're now concluding a book at the think tank, which we're calling Techno-Feudalism, which is dealing with a set of the same issues. And we're critiquing the techplex, but we're also critiquing Shoshana Zuboff with lots of respect and love, which is that Shoshana herself and all the other critics of the techplex themselves, when they talk about the business model, right? The techplex is absorbing your data, pouring it into machine intelligence, creating a personality profile, selling it to misaligned third parties in order to create predictive analysis of what you might do. And we're selling that predictive analysis ostensibly, right, to be able to control the world. That's one of the reasons. The techplex is lined up with the security establishments. There's an enormous amount of data on that to try and create some sense of control in a world run wild, and for exponential profit and power. So Zuboff names the business model, but she refuses to tell us what first principles and first values is this violating. And every time in surveillance capitalism, she begins to come close to a first principle and a first value. What she does is, now stay really close to me, we're doing a very deep dive here. What she does is, so for example, taking your data should be a violation of personhood. It's a violation of the intrinsic dignity of human personhood, which is a first value and first principle of cosmos. But Zuboff refuses to declare it as so. And instead what she does is she cites Sartre, the existentialist, from his book Being and Nothingness, as the source of the value of personhood. But of course, what she's doing is she's avoiding the issue. She's actually making an intellectual, dishonest feint, thinking that no one will catch it, when in fact it undermines the very fabric of society, because Sartre is the apostle of cosmic meaninglessness. Sartre believes there are no first principles and first values. That's his whole point. Being and Nothingness is one of my favorite books. Read page 549 to 555. You'll see one of the cores right, of this argument in being and nothingness. For Sartre, there are no first values and first principles. For Sartre, there is no story of value. So what Zuboff is trying to do, which is the same thing that Don't Look Up is trying to do, is it's trying to say, okay, we're not going to name first principles and first values. Now, why? Not because Zuboff's a bad person. She's a great person. Not because Adam McKay and the gang making, right, this movie Don't Look Up are bad dudes, bad people. They're fantastic human beings. No, they actually identify first values and first principles with medievalism. They think that value is a pre-modern quality. And they've been completely taken by the academic critique of value, which says that all value is relative, right? All value is always changing. So therefore, we can never talk about first values and first principles. Now, the academic critique is partially right. There's critiques of natural law, right? Which claims first values and first principles that shows that natural law is actually making religious claims and claiming to be doing first values and first principles. And natural law doesn't take into account, for example, the fact that love, which is a value, changes all the time. So the academic critique of natural law, or first values and first principles, says you can't declare first values and first principles, because even if you say love is a value, love was something 1,000 years ago and something else 2,000 years ago. So clearly it's complete culturally contextual. It's completely socially constructed. That's not exactly right. It's a critical mistake. Of course, love evolves. Of course, love evolves. And of course, you can't say that this form of love is the first value and first principle. That's true. But love itself is not a social construction. Love in the general sense that I care, right? That I nurture, that I'm concerned with, that's a first principle and a first value. Now stay really close, friends. It's an evolving first principle and first value. Did you get that? In other words, first principles and first values are not only eternal, they're not only rooted in the very structure of cosmos, but by eternal, we don't mean unchanging. Eternity doesn't mean everlasting time. That's just a lot of time. By eternity, we mean it's beneath time. It's beneath the space-time continuum. Intrinsic in the fabric of cosmos is meaning. Meaning lives in cosmos, and meaning evolves, right? The nature of reality is that meaning evolves. Love evolves. The story of reality is the evolution of love. Evolution is not just the move from simplicity to complexity. Evolution is the progressive deepening of intimacies, the evolution of love. So love moves, gets deeper and deeper, gets wider and wider, right? Love used to mean, I love the people in my tribe, right? So everybody agreed you can't kill a human being, right? In the pre-modern period, but everyone said human beings are only the people in my tribe. That's tragic. So there was love, but love was for my community. So that was a boundary mistake. It was a critical boundary mistake. We need to shift the boundary. No one's outside. No one's outside the circle. The evolution of love means we expand the circle. We expand our circle of intimacy and love. We expand our circle of care and concern, right? And we love more and more until no one's outside the circle. But love itself, love is a first principle and first value. And unless I declare love to be a first principle and first value, unless intimacy is a first principle and a first value, unless the irreducible uniqueness of human personhood is a first principle and a first value, unless trust is a first principle and first value, unless integrity is a first principle and first value, right? Unless there's first principles and first values embedded in a story of value. And the story of value is I'm a unique self, and I have unique gifts to give, and I have a unique story to tell, and I have a unique poem to write, a unique song to sing. And together, right, I can care for larger than my egocentric circle. We can come together as unique selves and join the unique self symphony and address the unique needs in our unique circle of intimacy and influence. That's what it means to be alive, to give my gifts for the sake of my own full being and for the becoming of the whole planet, right? That's a great story. I'm a unique self. I'm a hero in this story. I have superpowers that no one else that ever was, is, or will be can have. And living my life and giving my unique gift, which has irreducible value that's needed by all that is, wow, right? And my person, it's irreducible and it's not commodifiable. And you don't have a right to steal my data and feed it into machine intelligence. Never begin to get it. But unless you have first values and first principles, you can't even begin the conversation. And paradoxically, just like Shoshana Zuboff, who gets the violation of the techplex, but refuses to name first values and first principles through no fault of her own, because she didn't have right? An understanding of first values and first principles that worked. She was right about that. So what we're doing now at the center is we're now articulating a new vision of value. Value is evolving value. There are evolving first values and first principles. Human personhood, intimacy, love, trust, integrity. Those are not social constructions of reality. Those are not contrived meaning. Those are part of the meaning structures of cosmos, and cosmos is its design structure. It's inherent in the conflict between Darwin and design is nonsense. Neo-Darwinism is dead, as is intelligent design. There's a much deeper third. Reality has an inherent design. There's an inherent telos to reality. Reality is moving from mud to Mozart. It's moving from bacteria to Bach. It's moving from quarks to culture. There's a story, and that story is the evolution of love, in which there's more and more creativity, and there's more and more care, and there's more and more uniqueness, and there's more and more interconnectivity, and there's more and more intimacy. Those are the plot lines of cosmos. And my story and the plot line of my story participates in those plot lines of cosmos. And here's the thing, stay close, friends. We've just begun. All of that is missing in Don't Look Up. Don't Look Up, they sense it, but they can't quite say it because they don't have a language. They don't have a new story of value. It's our job right here, right in One Mountain, is to articulate this new story of value. They're looking for it. And we're going to get deeper and deeper. We're going to do a couple more rounds here. We're going to get deeper and deeper. It's shocking and it's beautiful. So there's this story, this thread, this invisible thread that weaves through the movie about this 3-star general charging for snacks, and he's lying because that symbolizes, it captures, and it's an intuitive realization by the makers of the movie, which they don't quite know how to explicate. It's not quite formulated even in their own minds and hearts, but they're reaching for something, and they're reaching for something good and true and beautiful, which is reality is made up of billions of micro acts. This is a little small, minor, irrelevant act, but it's everything because it's exponentialized across the system when the system is sans first values and first principles. Wow. Does everyone begin to get that? I want to add another piece. Let's go deeper, okay? Let's go a little deeper, okay? We're going to go a little deeper. There's one more step, and then we're at the very beginning, and we're not going to go too long, but this is just the beginning, and it's gorgeous. There's a scene later in the movie, which we're gonna see later, probably next week. But there's a scene in which Peter Isherwell, and if you're in the chat box, let me know if you remember the scene. Peter Isherwell, who is the head of BASH, and he's the guy who always says, "It's fine, it will all be fine." Remember him? Who remembers him in the chat box? Who remembers him? Okay, I'm going to take a look in the chat box for a second now. Right? Who remembers the guy? Everyone remember him? Okay, so there's a scene in which Peter Isherwell, right, is presenting to the cabinet. And this is after there's been a mission to deflect the comet. The comet can be deflected. And then Peter Isherwell, the head of BASH, right, says to Janie, "Hey, we got to call back the nukes because I just realized there's all this value, right, in these outer space, in this comet. There's all these rare minerals that are now controlled by China, which is actually the situation today. And what we're going to do is we're going to not take it down with this nuclear strike. We have another way of doing it." And he has a Nobel Prize winner get up in front of the cabinet and explain how they're going to be able to take the comet down. You would think, Nobel Prize winner, we should trust her, right? No, we shouldn't trust her. That's the point, right? The point is that actually the process of peer review didn't take place in the science. And actually, the structure of a business, which is supposed to be in dialectical balance with the structure of science, is actually completely disproportionately undermined the checks and balances of society. So actually, the same way that the general sells for $20 snacks, the Nobel laureate, right, actually sold herself to BASH and actually risked the planet because she was in her win-lose metrics. She's working for BASH. She was a Nobel Prize winner, and she's sitting there working for BASH, right, to actually increase, right, their profits. Today in the world, just as an example, there's about 10,000 great data scientists in the world today. Data science is utterly critical, right, in order to avoid existential risk. Virtually all 10,000 of those data scientists work for Google and Facebook and Apple and Amazon, right, and Microsoft. Those are the big five. So there's been a complete drain of the best skills from Nobel Prize winners, right, all the way down. Right? The universities can't even get people to fill the positions because everyone's working for these big five. So once there's no first values and first principles, there's nothing to actually cause even a person who's a Nobel laureate to actually pursue knowledge. Right? The great movement of science was based on first values and first principles. The value of truth, the value of facts, the value of the pursuit of knowledge. Once we deconstruct value, we deconstruct the pursuit of knowledge. We deconstruct facts. We deconstruct the nobility of science, and science becomes hijacked and the information ecology breaks down. So we're precisely at a moment when the information ecology is broken down. And look at the huge conflict over vaccines, in which there's two very clear sides that actually don't speak to each other, when there's validated information on both sides, but actually it's not being driven by fact. It's being driven by other meta-narratives, right, which actually collapse the system. Right? So it's a very critical idea. The second you actually have a win-lose metrics, rivalrous conflict governed by win-lose metrics, the second rivalrous conflict governed by win-lose metrics drives the three-star general who's going to sell snacks. It also drives the Nobel laureate to work for Bash instead of being involved in the first principle and first value of the noble pursuit of truth, the noble pursuit of facts. And it's shocking. Okay. So now let's go another step. Okay. We're going to go just one more step here just to kind of get this. So how are we doing, everybody? Is everyone tracking? We doing okay? Okay, let's go to the next step. And it's beautiful, but it's beautiful in a shocking way. And it's beyond important. So there's a gentleman named Brian Cox. I want to validate the claim that I just made. I just made a claim that this movie refuses to name first principles and first values, although it intuits their breakdown and it artistically, aesthetically documents that intuitive breakdown in these four scenes of the snack ripoff, right? The breakdown of trust, and Jennifer Lawrence's shock at that breakdown of trust. Now, stay close. We're going to go just two short steps, but it's critical. The movie itself is shocked that no one's looking up. And by no one looking up, the movie's making obviously an obvious and correct point, right? Which has consumed my last decade, which is, oh my God, existential risk is real. Why are we not responding? Because that's important. We have to save the future, but stay close. And here's the deal. And this is the deal. And this is where it gets kind of crazy. See, here's the thing. Saving the future itself is a first principle and first value, right? In other words, we only move to save ourselves when we're immediately confronted by the tiger. When we're not immediately confronted by the tiger or by cancer, we actually go about our business and we displace death, right? We're going to talk about this in 3 stages now. We displace death. Now, as long as the human being has the capacity to displace existential risk beyond the thread of their own lifetime, even if it will enter into their children's lifetime, as long as the human being can displace the thread of existential risk, right, beyond their lifetime, they will look away. Because, right, the very notion that we're going to save the future, the responsibility to future generations, is itself a first principle and first value. Now, stay close. We understand, right, if someone's dying in front of us, that we have to take care of them. We get that. Someone's dying in front of us, we pretty much get there's some responsibility to save them. That's still, generally in place, although not absolutely. But what happens if someone's dying on the other side of the world? So let's say we displace the ethical challenge geographically. There's a geographical spatial dislocation of the ethical challenge. It's happening in Biafra. let's say, stay close with me, my friends. Let's say that my name is Bill Clinton. And let's say you were living in America while Bill Clinton was president, or any place else in the world, or in France, or in Great Britain, right, or in Holland. And everybody in the entire world knew that 800,000 Hutus were macheting and massacring men, women, and children, Tutsis, in Rwanda, and no one in the world did anything for 100 days, although everyone knew it was happening. Why? Because they looked away, because they couldn't actually be intimate. And intimacy means feel me feeling you. Intimacy means I shatter the boundary of my skin encapsulated ego, and I realize I'm not merely a separate self, and we're part of the same field, although we're unique expressions of the field. But actually, to actually experience that intimacy, right, to actually transcend the optical delusion of separate consciousness, to transcend the optical delusion of separateness, right, the effort to do that, that's a value. That's the value of transformation. That's the value of intimacy. But if that's not a first value and first principle, which there's an ultimate violation if I ignore it, I'm not going to do it, right? The Black Lives Matter movement in America explodes because everyone sees in front of them the violation of a first principle and first value, right? You see a man, right, with a knee on his neck for 9 minutes, right, who dies. It's a kind of snuff film, right, seen, right, tens and tens of millions of times, and you realize, oh my God, that's a violation of first values and first principles. And even though we were in the middle of the beginning of COVID then, and everyone was was not sure how exactly contagion worked, and the fear was correctly real, everyone flooded the streets, because we flooded the streets because our will is activated by the violation of a first principle and first value. But if there's no first principle and first value, then there's nothing that calls me to be intimate with Rwanda. There's nothing that calls me to step out of, right, Pink Floyd, Comfortably Numb, right, the business of usual as my life. So no one responded to Rwanda, friends, because there was a dislocation in space. Now, what if, friends, right, we move from a dislocation in space to a dislocation in time? Because we're all afflicted by temporal myopia. Temporal means time. Myopia means a narrowing of vision. Meaning, if we can't feel what's happening right now because it's in a different part of the world, what expectation is that we're going to feel what's happening in a different time, where the dislocation is not spatial but temporal, not space but time? That's actually, it's not human nature. No. It's human nature sans first principles and first values. Human beings are, stay close, human beings are not naturally good. Human beings are inherently good, but goodness needs to be trained. And we only train goodness if there's a value in that training. If goodness is a value, we train it. I was talking to a woman named Betsy Farnham, who passed away not long ago, a wonderful woman, right, who taught at one of the leading, at Exeter Academy, one of the leading academies in the country, a fantastic human being. And she said to me, when I came to teach in Exeter, everybody knew what the good, the true, and the beautiful was. And Exeter is the institution that produced Mark Zuckerberg, not by accident. When I came to teach at Exeter, she said, everyone knew the good, the true, and the beautiful. That's what we wanted to facilitate from the students. By the time I left Exeter, she said, when she retired a few years ago, and she recently passed, she said, no one, the students nor the faculty, no one knew what the good, the true, and the beautiful were. And its value itself collapsed. And the collapse of value is at the core of existential risk, right? And so we need to actually reclaim first values and first principles, but evolving first values and first principles embedded in a story of value. And a new story of value, that's the overwhelming moral imperative of the time. And if we make a movie, Don't Look Up, it's fantastic. But if we're not willing, just like Shoshana Zuboff was unwilling in surveillance capitalism, to declare first values and first principles, and instead we rely on this implied kind of theatrical ruse, we're going to have these 4 clips, right, about the violation of integrity, right, charging $20 for snacks, which no one tracks. And probably the writers themselves didn't quite track. It's incoherent because there's no story of value. So that's a very, very, very big deal. Okay. So let's hold this together. So if that's the case, then we can't expect people to look up, because looking up itself, right, when the comet's not right in front of you, they only look up in the movie when the comet's right in front of them. There's no more dislocation in time. But when there is a dislocation in time and you can't see the comet, right? You can't see the 10 forms of existential risk because you're going about business as usual and you're myopically, narcissistically involved in the trauma of your life, whatever it might be, and in the victim dramas of your life, or in the rivalrous conflict, win-lose metric success 2.0 story. There's no possible way you're going to look up, because you're looking up beyond the time horizon of your life. Right? And unless there's a first principle and first value that says we're committed to the continuity of consciousness, we're committed to the continuity of generations, and it's possible to do that. Okay, it's completely possible to do. I want to just tell you a story for a second. I was in Dharamsala, a bunch of years back. Okay, I was in Dharamsala a bunch of years back, and I was talking to the Dalai Lama, and we're gonna finish with this point. Okay. And then we're gonna go into prayer. And we just began. But we're gonna take the text of this movie that gets more and more shocking and more subtle and more beautiful. I mean, stunningly beautiful. But I just want to give you just a 10-second conversation, Dalai Lama. So I was in his home in Dharamsala after we had spent some time together at the Pope's summer residence in Castel Gandolfo, where kind of a group of people got together a bunch of years back to talk about the future of the world, as if anyone cared what we had to say, right? So, and the Dalai Lama and I had a little bit of an argument there. It's a story I've told before. I won't tell it to you now, but in short, we had a little bit of an argument, right? And I thought he was saying things that were kind of fundamentally off. And so we had a clash, but we liked each other in the clash because we got out of the politeness of it all, okay? We got out of the politeness of it all. So let's stay close. Let's stay close. It's really, really beautiful. Let's stay really, really close. Okay, so what happened was, and let's stay really close and really, because it's crazy important, right? So what happened was, right, he invites me to Dharamsala, right? And, in Dharamsala, he says, how do we get people to concerned with the future? And so I said to him, right, and he was particularly, he says, how do I get Tibetans, right, concerned with the future of Tibetan Buddhism? And I said to him, and I remember it very carefully, I said it very clearly, and it was very poignant. I said, there has to be a value of the future, right? The desire for the future is a value. And unless we declare a value of the future, we can't get there. We just can't get there. There's no possible way to get there. Does everyone get that? You can't get there. And I want to just give you an example of one people, right? Which is a very, very beautiful example. And this is, and I'll take the example, of and it's an interesting example of the Jewish people. And, the Jewish people, like the Christian people, like the Muslim people, have their strengths and weaknesses, right? We all do. And I was raised in the Jewish world, so I know a little bit about it. And it's a beautiful and complex world. And there's one thing they got right. When they got right is commitment to continuity. And it's when you grow up in that community, there's a first principle and first value, right? To have a continuity of community. That's a big deal, right? There's a first principle and first value. I'm concerned with the future generations. And so therefore, even though, stay close, it's very, very wild. Even though all the historians said that when you lose your land and you lose your common language, right? And you lose your political power, and you go into exile, and it's a worldwide exile, and you're hated, right? As the Jews were, right? All through the ages, right? Where the scapegoat of humanity, you disappear as a people. There's no way you can survive as a people. And scholar after scholar, right, of history has said that if you lose your land, you lose your language, you lose your culture, you're dispersed around the world, you have no power, there's no possibility you'll survive. It's impossible. And yet, as Mark Twain pointed out, he said, all things pass, and yet somehow something remains. These people are still here. Why are they still here? Right? They're still here because they established a first principle and first value of commitment to the future. Right? Now, this is not an argument for Judaism or Christianity or Islam or secular humanism, obviously. The point is, we have to establish first principles and first values. And the commitment to the future itself is a first principle and first value. Does everyone get that? In other words, if you sell snacks and you lie about it, and you're a Nobel laureate, right, who gives into the win-lose metrics, those are violations of first principles and first values, right? But the commitment to the future itself is a first principle and first value. And unless we understand and we create a first principle and first value that we are part of a shared humanity, but not as a conjecture, that's actually the metaphysical fact of reality. There's an optical delusion of separateness. Unless we actually begin to go much, much deeper into our identity, and we actually understand our identity to exist beyond our death, unless we have a broader vision of a world beyond our death, which is where we're going to begin next week. What happens after death? The movie talks, there's 4 or 5 scenes in the movie where they say, we're all going to die. Well, if in fact it ends at death, then it's very hard to enact a first principle and first value, which is responsible for the future. Right? Because this is a short end story where in the end, everyone dies. So if everyone dies a little sooner, the collective death of humanity, not that much different than the death of an individual human. Unless we can actually understand that there's value beyond the collective death of humanity, right? That beyond the collective death of humanity, there's meaning, right? Beyond our individual death, there's meaning. There's continuity of consciousness. There's meaning that lives underneath and beyond death. We're never going to be responsible for a world beyond death. It's a very, very deep idea. And I'm going to check in the chat box, see if just it's subtle, it's deep, it's beautiful. It's not, but it's not obvious, but it's everything, right? It's completely everything, right? If it all ends at death, that means it's a materialist game in which meaning is just created. That's not the case. And I want to just get this really clearly. I mentioned Brian Cox before. So Brian Cox, representing the BBC, talks about this movie. And the way he understands this movie, I'm going to read it to you. He says, essentially what this movie is saying is, right, it's 400 billion stars, he says, from trillions of planets, right? And it could be we're the only civilization that exists at all, right? And we have intelligence, and we create meaning. So the only place that meaning exists in the world, he writes, right, is therefore very possibly on our planet. And so therefore, if meaning is destroyed on our planet, here's the quote, it's the destruction of meaning in the galaxy. And then he says again at the end of the BBC clip, and he says, you've got to realize, right, that this is the only place in the galaxy where anything matters. So that's Brian Cox, BBC, on the movie, right? This is the only meaning in the galaxy. So therefore, if existential risk is fulfilled, there's no more meaning in the galaxy. Or this is the only place in the galaxy where anything matters. So what's Brian Cox saying? That's the non-first principles, first values reading of the story. And the movie allows itself to be read that way. It doesn't stand for first principles and first values. Does everyone get that? It's subtle, but it's beautiful and it's wildly important. It's not true. Meaning is intrinsic to cosmos, right? Allurement, autonomy, first principles and first values, just like they exist in mathematical equations, the exterior sciences exist in the interior sciences, right? Love is a real value of cosmos. Intimacy is a real value of cosmos. They evolve, right? They get deeper, right? From matter to life to mind. Value gets deeper. It gets more subtle. It gets more full. Right? We evolve, right? That's a huge deal. The evolution of value is clear, but value is real in the cosmos, right? And it's only when I get that value is real. Yes, it's evolving value. And once I get that value is real, then my entire life, the joy, the ecstasy, the urgency, the pleasure, the eros of my life is incarnating, right? An evolving value, right? When atoms come together, atoms are allured to each other. Stay close, friends. Atoms are allured to each other. They're separate atoms. They're allured to each other, subatomic particles, and they create a new whole greater than the sum of the parts. That's value. That's value. When Alfred North Whitehead, the great mathematician who wrote Principia Mathematica, Volume 2 with Bertrand Russell at Cambridge, what Whitehead talks about is the interior consciousness that goes all the way down the evolutionary chain. Right? There's meaning. Meaning means there's patterns of value with deep intention of unbelievably complex structure at the subatomic level. This is not a mechanistic world. That's a lie. Science doesn't say that. Scientism, dogmas of science say it. If you actually study science, you actually get that meaning, structures of meaning exist all the way down the evolutionary chain. Atoms are coming together, right? There's a dimension of freedom, right, that exists in atoms themselves, as Stuart Kaufman's already pointed out. So the movement towards intimacy, right, towards greater wholes from separate parts, right, the movement of allurement, right, the movement to create patterns of communication. Cells, individual cells, when they're under crisis, literally rewrite intelligently their DNA codes. Right, that's called natural genetic engineering. James Shapiro, University of Chicago, one of the best geneticists of this generation. Barbara McClintock, Nobel Prize, 1972-73 for transposition, horizontal gene transfer. Right? In other words, reality is intelligent all the way up and all the way down. Its meaning structures all the way up and all the way down. The world's invested with intelligence. It's invested with meaning. It discloses meaning. It evolves meaning. And we're in devotion to meaning. We're in devotion to value. We're incarnations of that value, right? We are value come alive. We're evolution come alive. So that's where we got to go. We got to go to this place of creating a new vision of value. Right? Wow. Leonard Cohen. We're going to close with Leonard Cohen. Thank you, everyone. This is a big conversation today, and I'm delighted to take any questions, right? And any inquiry, right? And any, send them in, and we'll address them next week with complete and utter delight. This is a hard conversation, but it's a gorgeous conversation. You can email me directly, anyone who'd like to, right? The overwhelming moral imperative, right, of this generation is to create a new vision of value, which is not medieval. It's not a new age repetition, right, of medieval claims of value owned by one religion, right? And it's not fundamentalist value. It's a new vision of value, right? Wow. So let's come together and let's pray for that vision. And let's pray in the way that they pray at the very end of Don't Look Up, when they come together and they say, okay, let's pray. Right, let's pray, and let's have Leonard Cohen, right, together. Leonard Cohen together, here we go. Right, the holy and the broken hallelujah, which is about every piece of my life matters because my life has value. That's what Cohen understands. There's a reason why this song has more covers than any other song, Hallelujah. Why? Because hallelujah is a way of praying. It's a way of reclaiming prayer, and prayer is a value because prayer says I'm not alone in the cosmos. Right? It means that we're, right, she lives in us and she holds us at the same time. That's why thousands of covers of Hallelujah, more than any other single song, because it's intuiting a first value and a first principle. So take us inside, right? Hallelujah, the holy and the broken hallelujah. Yeah.
Now I've heard there was a secret chord that David played and it pleased the Lord. But you don't really care for music, do you? It goes like this: the fourth, the fifth, the minor fall, the major lift, the baffled king composing hallelujah. wasn't much. I couldn't feel, so I tried to touch. I've told the truth, I didn't come to fool you. And even though it all went wrong, I'll stand before the Lord of Song with nothing on my tongue but hallelujah.
What we always have to be is in the immeasurable. In the immeasurable, give everything you can. If you can give your heart, give your heart. If you can support the Great Library, support the Great Library. If you can give time, right? If you can just blow us open with just, when we blow each other open with levels of tenderness and respect and honor and integrity and care, right? That's everything, right? We live in the immeasurable, right? It's always about the priceless. And one of the things I'm just super proud of, right, of One Mountain, is that we're all giving everything that we have, right? And our only measurement is how much integrity, how much goodness, how much love, how much beauty, how we hold each other, okay? So everyone, welcome, welcome, welcome. We're gonna always ask people to help a resource, right? And resourcing can be time, it can be funds, right? It can be editing, right? It's a very much a movement of the people and by the people, right? Of all of us together, right? I live in a little 2-room flat, don't own a house, right? Have a used car that someone gave me, right? So we're all, right? And don't take a salary, right? So we're about as kind of clear and good as we can on that. And I love the fact that we should always keep reminding ourselves the only thing that counts is the immeasurable, right? And so that's gorgeous and fantastic. Okay, so everybody, wild love. Let's just offer a last prayer in the chat box. And maybe here's a simple prayer, if this works for you. And if it doesn't, you pick your own prayer. But how about, I'm willing to go all the way in this lifetime. That's my prayer. And I'm willing to go all the way in this lifetime. All right, who's willing to go all the way in this lifetime? Krista, take us inside. Tell us how to do it. Okay, as Krista's talking to us, offer a prayer. We're willing to go all the way in this lifetime. Right, Krista, talk to us. Oh my God.
Oh my God. Yes. Thank you, Dr. Mark Goffney. And thank you everyone for being here, for participating in the evolution of love. It is such an honor to do this together. And that's exactly why we are here to do it together. And that's my invitation to all of us here, because we get to do this, we get to create this, and this is ours to create as a unique self-symphony. And Mark said it so beautifully. You are invited. We are inviting each other to participate in whatever way feels great to us. So one of the ways, and the most important ways maybe to do that, is to be here together every week, to commit, to show up, and to join us here. And I can imagine for those of you who are new here, it is quite a lot to take in, and there's a lot of new language. And not someone asked in the chat box, what are first principles and first values? And I will make sure to send out a paper specifically about that in our next email. So also, if you are watching this in a replay on Facebook or YouTube or anywhere, make sure that you go to our website, onemountainmanypaths.org, and register, because every Tuesday we send out the replay with beautiful, beautiful gifts to you. And if you are ready for the next step, I also want to let you know that all of this Dharma, all of these first principles and first values, this new story for a new humanity has been extensively recorded every year. Every year we meet for the Outrageous Love Festival, which is an 8-day live in-person retreat in Europe. And all of these festivals have been recorded for 9 years already. And we created beautiful, beautiful courses out of that. So those are courses that you can study yourself. But we also have the study groups where you can study together with other members of One Mountain. So I just want to show you where you can read a little bit more about that. So if you go to our website, onemountainmanypaths.org, and you click here on membership, you can see what it means to become a member. If you scroll all the way down, you will find all the courses that we offer. And we do encourage everyone to give as much as you can. So you can choose your own contribution right here. But also, if you cannot afford to give a financial contribution, but you want to participate and contribute in another way, you are super welcome to do so. Just send me an email. I'll put my email also in the chat box, and I'm happy to talk to you, to get to know you, to be together. So now we end our live stream for this week in the best and beautiful way, and that is by seeing all of our gorgeous faces. While I was talking, you were invited to participate as a panelist. So if you get a notification, please click yes, and it means that you will be able, if you want, to turn on your camera. And then I want to ask you to go on the top right corner of your screen and click on gallery view, so we can all see each other, see this beautiful, unique self symphony, and we dance it out together with this most beautiful song. We are the people. We are the people we have been waiting for. Oh my God, let's dance together. Thank you. Thank you so much.